Let's do a Subaru video. So how do you know if your valve cover gasket's leaking? Well, the biggest thing is you'll smell it. You won't see anything leaking on the top. You may see a couple of drips on the bottom, but the exhaust comes out the sides, and where the leak for the valve cover gasket, if that's what you have, it goes to the sides. It creates all this smoke in here, and then you see these little grills. The smoke will go through these grills. It gets past this rubber dam because it gets worn out. It'll go through here into your HVAC, so when you got your heater on, you're on your way up to the ski resort, it's going to smell like burning oil. Step 1, get up. Lift by the pinch welds or by the frame. I find that by jacking the vehicle up, I don't have as much of an issue dealing with bending over or getting underneath to get those last 2 bolts. You'll see what I mean. You can even use your spare tire jack and some wood blocks if you have to. So I'm going to start from the tire and show you where the valve cover is. That's the valve cover. It's this little part right here, and the gasket's the seal that goes between the cylinder head and the valve cover. There's little gasket seals that go on each of these bolt holes. When these leak, all that oil gets onto the exhaust and makes that putrid smell. I was looking at my downpipe here, and the downpipe has been puked on by the CV axle. It's queued up so you can see exactly where it's spitting out. You can see the burn marks. So that's probably more of what I've been smelling. I'll have to address that later. I know last ski season when it got cold, this leaked more, and through the summer it seemed to swell up and not leak as much. So we're just gonna go ahead and do the valve cover gaskets today, but just because there's one problem doesn't mean that there's not 2. I just go through on the washer reservoir. You just crack them free a little ways. I like to use a long extension because that way I can just grab it, spin them out that way, and then just switch this way. You don't need power tools. They're really nice to have. In fact, I'll switch halfway through the job. I just want to show you some of these techniques in case you didn't know. Box, we can pull that out too so that we can just set it up aside. You can just spin them around, spin them out. Just go to town on these things, man. So I disconnect the negative terminal first. The reason why is if I'm on this terminal and I touch something like the battery hold down, it doesn't do anything to hurt anything really. You get that up out of the way so it's not making contact. Now you do the positive. And now if I were to touch something metal anywhere, it won't arc. But if this is hooked up and you touch positive to negative, it'll spark. It can cause damage to your tools and your car. We'll go ahead and do our battery hold down stuff here. So I'll leave that one somewhat tight, and then this one just really go for it. So the reason why I get this one nice and loose is I can see everything in there to hook it back in. Hook it back in, well yeah, it's a hook. You can pull this up like that or pull the hook out if you like, and then just pull the battery out like so. It needs to be cleaned. I'm just going to pull all of this out because it needs some love. It's been out ball hauling in the desert. So if you look at the reservoir, we've got the bolts undone here, so we can pull this up and give ourselves a little better access. And you see that there's 2 plugs here. There's one for the rear reservoir and one for the front. So you just push down on the side there and you can see where the little hook is. It'll unhook from the pump. So if you rock away from where that pushes in, it helps to get it out a little easier. Let me show you a little trick for getting these hoses off. If you grab them and twist just a little bit, you see how that one already wants to leak? So I'll twist them, and that gets them so that they come off pretty easy. But I'll pull the close one first. So I just hold the 2 lines like this and then pull it up. You can see that I just grab it with my thumb in the other spot. There's 1,000 ways to do this. This is the way I like to do these. Oftentimes these are low on fluid and you just lay them on the side. This one's a little too full to do that. I have an extra washer fluid bottle I keep on hand for such occasions. So if you just hook that through there, it helps to hold that back. Just pull the hose through here. To get these off, the first thing you want to do is push the little button on the back side. You can see this tab right there. To get them apart, it's the same thing but the other side. There's just a tab right here. And do it again. And the best part is, look how clean that is. This is not a Ford product. If this was a Ford, it would like break the plug and it wouldn't come apart because it'd be so full of dirt. I like to group these in the dish so that I know what came from where. Plus that little wire tie, I just leave that on the bolt, and that way I know that goes to the oil fill for the ignition coil harness. I just grab it by that tie, and that way you don't drop your bolt. You gotta be a little careful. This is good quality plastic. It's not like a lot of the stuff you find on American vehicles, but it's old. It's been through a lot of heat cycles. It's been warmed up with the engine and cooled off and extremes. There we go. It's like surgery. That's a little concerning. I want to spray that out. Got a little rust in there. I'll leave a link for this in the description. What rust? So this one's a 12 millimeter. Just crack it and spin it. If it doesn't crack right away, be careful because you don't want to break this whole post. So that washer, I'll just lift it off with the ringlet. So we've got this, and remember this goes underneath and then it goes over. It's got a little clip on it that clips to the oil filler tube. So we're just going to take this and tie it back with the rest of everything. These we can hold up out of the way for the most part. The AC compressor line, pretty much just have to deal with it. Just twist and rock and work its way up. Look at that. You can see that the O-ring's just nasty. But inside looks good. Looks like whoever has this car changes the oil. Look at the color. We've got a nice honey color. You'll see more of that as we go on. Alright, so we need to tie these back. I don't want to be snapping wires to do it. So I'm just going to see what I can get away with. If you push them too hard, sometimes you can snap stuff. That's not good. You don't want that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get into the spark plug. So we need to go back to 12 millimeter again. Just lay that in there close. Make sure that we're on good and tight. Just get your leverage, get on the end of that ratchet. It's a good idea to replace your spark plugs if you haven't, if you're due, because you're going to be into this. The hardest part about doing this is just getting in this far to get to the ignition coils, and once they're off, you might as well pull it. I'll just take the socket by hand, just roll it out. Roly-poly, make her spin. So the bolt's not going to come all the way out of the ignition coil. It's kind of retained a little bit. Got two of my fingers resting on the unibody. That's the frame of a car that doesn't really have a frame other than the sheet metal it's made of. Get as far as you can with the socket and then do the rest by hand. Sometimes you have to get two hands in there. I'll have like one finger on each side of the bolt, just whatever it takes. That's why it's nice to have it jacked up when you do this part, because then you don't have to worry about bending over so far. You can actually take your hips, knees, whatever, and just kind of lay them on the car. So to get the ignition coils out, ideally you want to twist them. You want to twist them back and forth, but unfortunately there's nowhere to twist because it's a box shape in a box. What happens is you just wiggle them. So as I pull it up, I just kind of roll it up at the same time. If you're in an area where there's a lot of salt, it's a good idea to wire brush these if they're a little bit rusty, and then paint them, because these are layers of metal. These are basically layers of sheet metal, and when they rust they expand and it ruins them. Anyway, I tend to just leave them connected. I don't mess with them a whole lot. The weight of the ignition coil, you just flop it over the top. I find that's nice. We'll get this one out of the way. Now I've got just a little bit more access in there. So my bottom finger's pushing away on the bottom and my top finger's pulling toward me. I'll work on a car with somebody and they'll be like, oh, I can't get it. And then I'll do a little trick like this. So how'd you do that? You know, burn the witch. What's your deal? How'd you do that? That's how. Just think what needs to happen and make it happen. Alright, so I just kind of roll that back and forth. Now, when I put these back in, I'm going to put dielectric silicone on them, and that's going to help them to come back out easily. If you look at the end of this one, the reason why it came out as easy as it did is to see the white stuff in there. Somebody used that dielectric grease, that anti-seize or something, to cause that to not get stuck to the plug. You can see the bolt, it doesn't come out all the way. It's got a little bit of retention. It's not threaded on this part, it's threaded here, and then there's like one line of threads, a couple lines of threads that keep it from moving around. So let's get the sucker rolled up and pulled out. So we've got both of these. Now what happens if we put these in wrong? Just take a good look at them. The longer of the two goes to the back. See how this one's got a short one and this one's got a long? So long to the back. You can lay them out long to the back if it helps you to remember. So the next thing we need to do is get our PCV hose. So we've got this hose that's connecting it, and then we just have our 8 bolts. There's 6 across the there's 3 across the top, 3 across the bottom, and then 1 on each end. But like I say, we've got this guy up here. You can pull off the thing that he's attached to if you want, or you can just pry it up with a pry bar. Just be careful because they can be brittle. You just take a small pry bar, and the Chinese finger trap rule applies. That is, if you push it by the end, you come off victorious. If not, you look like some school kid with his fingers stuck together. Oh, what am I gonna do? So there's 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3 across the top and the bottom, and then there's a bolt on this middle part and on this middle part on the end. So the conventional way to do this is you just take a ratchet or a wrench and you put it on here and you crack them loose, and you just do this forever. And it works. It's effective. But what I like to do, with the exception of that very back bolt, because the very back one is just a little pain in the neck, I've got a couple of tricks. One of the tricks that I use is just a pneumatic ratchet or an electric one. These can save you a lot of time on the ones that you can get to. This is a Milwaukee. I'll put a link in the description. This can save you a lot of time. As a mechanic of more than 30 years, I've about burned up the muscles in my back. You know, I can't be bent over for a real long period of time like I used to be able to. Plus there's a light, that's nice too. So what I do is I use pneumatics or power tools where I can, and that saves me from having to bend over quite so long. Another tool that you'll see me use a lot is a ratcheting box wrench. I really like these for getting those bolts in the back. See, on this one here, there isn't room to get in there with the air ratchet or the electric ratchet. But if you get in with this, I can stand up straight, and I just kind of hold the end of the wrench with my fingers, just work it back and forth. You can do it by hand the same way. I find that this is just kind of a good way to find a relaxing, easy way to do it. If you haven't been wrenching forever, bend over to your heart's content. Me, I gotta find tricks, and I share those tricks with you guys. So these little ratcheting wrenches are a lifesaver. I'll leave a link in the description. But especially if you don't buy the rest of them, at least buy a 10 millimeter. They just really save your back. You can stand up straight and get these loose. Once you find that they're not holding anymore, you just reach in there, and I'm just running like this, just rolling them like I was doing the other ones. If you can pull them out, you're good. Now notice that that's covered in oil. It's got that shine to it. You got to bear in mind that you got to replace all of these seals, or else you're not going to get a good seal and you can leak oil. So I pull out all of the bolts that I can, except for the top one. I call that my picture hanger. If you're going to hang a picture on your wall, you just put one in the top middle. That's what I'm doing. I pull the bottom ones last for whatever reason, good, bad, or otherwise. I don't want this to fall on my face. So I just reach down the back side here. Now bear in mind, you don't have a great big LED light bar in your way, so take comfort in that. But this is the tedious one. So there's 2 words that come to mind. One of them is frickin', and the other is tedious. This is frickin' tedious. That's just how it is. Let's see if I can get the rest from the bottom. So from under here, these 2 are pretty easy. I already cracked that one earlier, so I just got to spin it out. If you like doing the hard thing first, get that last back bolt here on the driver's side. If you like an easy victory to get you started and moving, do these ones. These 2 are pretty easy to get to. That back one's just a little bit of a pain. I would strongly recommend that you get a ratcheting box wrench if you're going to do this job. You can do it without one, but it's just not nearly as fun or as easy, or it's just not the same if you don't. Here's some pertinent information. We're doing this because there's been a leak here. If you find that you can't get it to twist, wipe it off with a rag or twist it with a rag. You'll find it comes out a lot easier. It may even jump out. Jeez. So I've got that bolt pulled all the way out by means of calculus. calculus is like math by exhaustion. You just work it down, down, down. So that's what I do, is I just take my arm, stick it back there with the ratcheting box wrench, twist it by hand, but it can't come out. It's actually touching against the body here. You can hear it tap there. So it's all the way out. Just leave it in there. Make sure when you put in the gasket, make sure you put the valve cover back in with that in there. So we'll go ahead and get this thing to burp. I'm just going to stick my thumb in the thumb hole, give it a little pop till it hits my pitcher hanger, and we'll back the pitcher hanger out and then peel the rest of the sucker out. You can see how the gasket's stuck to this and it's stuck to the car. You're going to need a drain pan. Forgot to do that, didn't I? My bad. It won't get too big, trust me. We got the oil catch basin under there, so I'm not worried about that. Some Subarus you have to lift the motor up a little bit. Most of them you don't. But you do have to at least get the gasket to let go. So I'm just going to take a big screwdriver and just go down the gasket and just scooch it out. I think we're hanging up on that last bolt. So if you get it nice and parallel and come straight up with it, there's that last bolt. It'll come out. What happens is these camshaft holders get stuck down in here, and then you just fight it. So if you can get it so that it's parallel, get it to pull out as far as you can and then up, then you're in good shape. You can see that we've got a little bit of leaking around where the ignition coils go in. That shouldn't be dirty like that. So those were dribbling. Speaking of dribbling, those were dribbling just a little bit, but it won't, before too long we'll get this sucker just all kinds of sealed up. We're also going to pull out these little half moons. They're just the little camshaft end stops. When you're manufacturing or machining these, they've actually got a rod that comes through and does the journals all perfectly straight, and it goes all the way through the head. Big old bar. So they've got these little caps that take up that space. You want to at least pull these things out and reseal them. There we go. There's a clean pull. And they're just a space filler. You can reuse it. I like new ones if you can. While things are torn down, this is a great time to replace your spark plugs. It'll save you some time doing it now versus having to pull out the battery and washer tank again. Not a huge job, not super critical. These are the platinum NGK plugs. They're actually pretty good still. When you look at them, you can see that the platinum's still good and the ground strap's still good. It's nice and square on this side. It's not tapering or getting thin like a knife edge. If I had better lighting, you'd see a little white button. There it is, a little platinum button. So there's really no need to replace this, and the gap's still good. On second thought, these came out kind of slow. I'm going to put some anti-seize on it. As I said before, all those spark plug manufacturers, they tell you not to use anti-seize. But you're nuts if you don't, if it's a steel spark plug into an aluminum head. The reason why they don't want to have you use it is they don't want to be liable if you over tighten it or strip it out, because it's an expensive repair. So they just say not to do it. However, if it rusts in there and you go to take it out and it rips the threads out, that's just as bad. So danged if you do and danged if you don't. I'd rather just be responsible, careful, whatever you want to call it, enough to use it so that it doesn't rip the threads out later, and tighten it in such a fashion that I don't strip the threads out. Totally possible, totally doable. Bear in mind, when I put on anti-seize, I don't do it just crazy. I put a little bit on that first thread and below, and as I screw this in, it's going to smear all the way around the plug and all the way down. Should you decide to use anti-seize, that's how much you should use. As for means to get it out, it's a 5/8 inch spark plug socket and a 3/8 inch 3-inch extension. I had to use a ratchet to get these all the way out. They just drug and drug and drug, but with a little bit of anti-seize, you can see that they're going in smoothly. That's a good sign. If you had a brand new cylinder head and a brand new plug, it should go in smoothly. Anytime it's not going well, it's because there's some kind of corrosion or something that you don't want in there. So I've cleaned the spark plugs, I put some copper anti-seize on them, and now they're good to go. I can guarantee you that those are not stripped, that they're tight enough that they'll stay in, and I can also guarantee you that when it comes time to pull them out, even if they've been in there a really long time, they'll come right out. So the next thing we're going to do is just clean everything. When I say clean everything, I mean wipe the oil off and get it so that it's nice and clean. You have a good factory surface to seal to, but also all the old gasket material. not just oil, and then I'll go through and use some brake cleaner on a rag, and I'll just wipe the surfaces. You could use rubbing alcohol, just whatever gets the oil off and prepares the surface so that the gasket can adhere like it would from the factory. Be sure to take note of all of these little places that have gray silicone on them. You want to get those areas cleared off to make room for the new silicone. You hear what I just said? So the new silicone that you use is going to go along and fill in these cracks here where the cams are, over the top, in between, and repeat. As I'm removing silicone from this, I'm mentally making notes to remind myself to put the silicone in these places. You just got to pick all the gaskets out, and you'll notice that there's oil in all of these. You just take a pick, run it into the gaskets. These aren't terrible, they're not rock hard yet, but they're certainly due to be replaced. I don't know if you can see that, but there's oil in the bottom of these. So you just take your pick, pick this one. Well, you just take your pick and run it down in there, and it just takes the oil right out of it. Like I say, I just try to get everything like it was from the factory. From the factory, they had great results. It lasted through the warranty, so that's what you want to replicate. But I do it with the Felpro kit. I find that the gaskets from Subaru are ridiculously expensive because they want, I looked it up and they wanted like $4 or $7 for each of these, something ridiculous, and everything was itemized. They don't have it in a kit that's all convenient. I use the Felpro gasket sets and I have good results on everything but 1997. For some reason, the 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engines, I can't get them dang things to seal for anything, but the rest of them, they're great. Alright, let's play What's in the Kit. And of course this isn't sponsored. I just got in the habit of using Felpro years ago and just kept doing it. Super careful opening the box. So this is on an 03 Subaru WRX. Results may be different for different applications. I'm liking what I see with the exception of the little half circles. I really would like to have seen these in there. The cork's a little different. I'm not sure about that, but what do you have, $4 a piece for these at the dealer? I'll probably pick up from the dealership some new half moons. Hopefully they have them. I wish I had a parts cleaner, but maybe in the new building I'll have that if I can ever get that started. Had it picked out and ready to go so many times and then have stuff come up and I never have the money to complete it. So we'll see what happens. Whee! Brake cleaner. Anyway, when you scrape it down, then there's nothing thick, there's no barrier. And then when you hit it with stuff again, comes off easy, just wipes right out. See? Seems like it has this certain amount that it'll soak in, and you scratch it, it gives it the opportunity. There's better ways of doing this. This is just how I do it. How do you guys clean your parts? Is it an art? I'd love to know about it. I just scrub it like it's dishes. Well, this one's looking pretty good. Hopefully I'm not getting this on the camera. Let's give it a good soak. If you want to rub it a little, yeah, go ahead. Man, I wish I had a way to clean this better. Dude, what are you doing? The Q-tips? I know. It's my car. This is the difference is if you're working on your own car or if you have somebody else working on it in a 9 to 5 capacity. On your car, you can be as picky as you want to be, I guess. If you want to get it all perfect, you go right ahead. No boss to say, hurry up, is that car done yet? Customer's waiting. No, you just take your time. Just do it how you want to do it. I should be in a hurry right now and get into the editing cave, but this is fun. It's stupid, but it's fun. This was really nasty when I bought this car. It's getting better with each oil change.
Bonus footage at the end.